took a bold step toward reconciliation. It voted unanimously to affirm my pastoral letter on racial reconciliation that called for the diocese to commit itself to reparations as a means of reckoning with our collusion with and participation in the enslavement of African peoples on our soil. And the 100+ years after slavery of racial discrimination. Why? Why did our 90% white diocese, stretching from Appalachia in the west to the Chesapeake Bay, Republican and Democrat, urban and rural, rich and poor, conservative and progressive, why did we all vote to take monies out of our financial resources and return it, that's right, return, not give it, to impoverished black communities across the state? We did it because we wanted to follow Jesus. We asked ourselves, what would Jesus do? If Jesus were speaking to the Diocese of Maryland today, we thought, having enriched itself in no small part on the backs of black and brown bodies, and did not compensate them for centuries for their labor, what would he have us do about that? Just say that that was then, this is now, bad stuff happens, it wasn't that bad, let's just sing Kumbaya and say we're all reconciled now. What would Jesus want us to do? Not feel, not wish for, but actually do. We discerned that Jesus first wanted us to tell the truth about ourselves and our history. And the truth is, we stole black lives. We stole from black livelihoods for centuries. We destroyed their families and enslaved them. We dehumanized them. We degraded them. We treated them like dirt. And we legislated that they were not fully persons constitutionally. And then after 250 years of enslaving them, for most of the years since slavery, we profited from social and economic structures that made sure that black people would be treated as inferior citizens among us, making it much more difficult for them to own property, to vote. And by the way, that's still going on today. How can we deny it? How can we suppress the vote? Making it, and trying our best to make sure that black people would not get a good education, not get good jobs, not get good health care, and not make as much money, resulting in generations of communities that could not hand down wealth to its descendants. Our nation ended slavery in 1865 after a bloody civil war waged to protect that evil institution. But we gave no property or monies to formerly enslaved persons for their uncompensated labor on behalf of our institution. What would Jesus do? Well, we know what Jesus' followers did. The Episcopal Church in the South helped to shape Jim Crow segregation. And the whole church, including this diocese, was largely silent for at least a century about segregation, lynchings, redlining, voter suppression, unfair employment practices, and other forms of racial injustice. But for the last 20 years or so, beginning during the episcopate of my predecessor, Bishop Bob Eloff, we in Maryland uncovered our history in order to get at the truth. We fearlessly looked at our history and told the story. And we encouraged our parishes to uncover their history and to tell their stories of how they relate to the Black community. And you know, sometimes the truth hurts. You know, you go to the doctor because you have a pain. The doctor runs some tests. He says, oh, it's cancer. We're going to have to operate. But who among you would say, no, don't do surgery on me, that'll hurt? No, in order to heal, you have to get the rot out. And that's painful, physically and emotionally. But we heard Jesus say somewhere, you know, the truth shall set you free. Tell the truth. What would Jesus do? What was he telling us? I learned something in Sunday school a long time ago. If you steal something from someone, you pay it back. You make amends. And if you can't pay it all back, at least you take steps to making amends. When we began to show how much our largely white church gained from centuries of racial injustice, that didn't sit right with us. That stuck in our craw. We kept hearing Jesus say, pay the debt. Pay your debts. Pay the debt you owe to impoverished Black communities. So at the next diocesan convention in 2021, we didn't do it in 2020 for reasons you may. We voted overwhelmingly to start a seed fund of $1 million. That figure was not a mathematical computation, but it was a moral one. It was taken from endowments and other diocesan funds, and it represented about 20% of our annual budget. And over the years, it's going to put a dent into some other things we wanted to do as a diocese. It hurt us a bit financially, and it should have. It was owed to the Black community. After centuries of stealing money from the African American community, we decided to invest in the African American community. Right now, we're funding projects, the Diocese of Maryland, in education, housing, healthcare, the environment, the environmental degradation in poor communities of color is a huge problem. Do a map of where most of the dumps are. We made some grants also in economic development to create jobs in the Black community. Yes, we, the church, did that. In an effort to repay some of that debt. You'll never be able to repay everything. But you can take steps. The response of the wider community was overwhelmingly positive. Except for once, I went on Fox News, Tucker Carlson interviewed me about this after I testified on Capitol Hill for HR 40, for the nation to study how we could do that. And they didn't like this at Fox News. But it was overwhelmingly positive elsewhere. Frankly, I expected more resistance. I did get, death threats, things like that. Apparently, that's the way we resolve differences too often in America, by violence. But we received letters and checks from individuals throughout Maryland and beyond Maryland who heard what we were doing. We were the first religious institution to do that. And these letters said various things of thank you, Diocese of Maryland. You finally admitted the truth. And you're putting your money where your mouth is, enclosed as a check. I want to help. I'll never forget, just a year or so before I left to retire. You know what retire means. You get tired all over again. James Church, Western Maryland, that's Appalachia. Coal mining, down to no industry. These people, for the most part, hard scrap. I went there on a visitation and I was getting ready to leave and they said, well, Bishop, wait a minute, we have something for you. That very small white congregation in that coal mining town whose ancestors had nothing to do with slavery, they handed me a check for $10,000. They wanted to be in solidarity with uplifting impoverished Black communities in our state as an expression of reparations. It was the biggest gift we got, not in terms of money, but for that congregation, that was the widow's mite. They got it in a way that most of our rich congregations never got. When Jesus said it's harder for a rich person into the kingdom of heaven, is because the richer you are, the tighter you hold on it. The word is reparations. Don't let that word scare you. Say it with me. Reparations. Reparations. It's not that hard. Reparations quite simply means to repair. Repair that which has been broken. It's not just about monetary compensation. An act of reparation is an attempt to make whole again, to restore, to offer atonement, to make amends, to reconcile for a wrong or an injury. Biblically, we get our cue first from Isaiah 58. In the interest of time, I won't read it all, just know that it's here. But this section beginning with verse 9, beginning verse 6. Is this not the fast that I choose, says the Lord, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless poor into your midst? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not hide yourself from them? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness. Your gloom shall be like noonday. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. Reparations is repairing the breach. There is a breach in our society. It's been here for a long time, and we're going to repair it. Just a few words in closing. A lot of people have different ideas about reparations, and they're based on false assumptions. Reparations is not throwing money at a problem. I find that to be a highly offensive image, and it's only used when it comes to communities of poverty. You don't throw money at the rich. My diocese had 25 Episcopal schools, most of them catering, almost all, to the wealthy. And you go in these schools and they have the latest equipment, fields and all that, not like the Baltimore public school system. And we started a program for inner city school kids in Baltimore. It's called the Sutton Scholars Program. I didn't name it, they named it in my honor, knowing I would raise money for it. But being committed to impoverished high school, and you go into those schools, leaking, bathrooms not working. But you know, I never heard anybody say, you know, we're just throwing money at those rich kids. No, you only throw money at the poor. I find it offensive. Reparations is not white people giving money to black people. I also find that highly offensive. It's like, okay, let me just give you some money, go away. It's not writing checks to individual black residents, an unworkable and unhelpful strategy. Obama said that very well many years ago. Any scheme of reparations about just giving money to individuals doesn't really solve the problem. That's the way we thought about it in Maryland. And it's not really financial assistance. Financial assistance, really, by an entity that stole from people who were robbed, and now we're going to assist you. I find that offensive too. But here's what reparations is. Reparations is what this generation will do to finally correct the damage that previous generations have caused. We all have inherited a racial mess. We didn't cause it, but we have to deal with it. And it'll take all of us to get the job done. It doesn't matter if your ancestors owned slaves, or if you're a descendant of slaves, or if you're a recent immigrant. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. Because we all live in a system built upon racism. All of us have a responsibility to repay the debt and repair the breach. If not us, who? If not now, when? You know, all too often we want to do reconciliation on the cheap. We don't want to pay the price of being reconciled. We want it for free. It shouldn't cost us anything. But if reconciliation doesn't cost anything, then it's not worth anything. There is no reconciliation without a reckoning. And the time is now. The payment of reparations is a reckoning for the racial sins of our nation and our church against persons with beautiful dark skin like mine. And friends, don't let retrograde forces and voices against this reckoning poison your minds and scare you about what reparations supposedly means. As I said, it's not about giving African Americans handouts. It's about investing in impoverished communities. For those who speak the loudest against it, they fail to recognize in their greed and racism that our previous generations lacked the courage to repay formerly enslaved black people. They kicked that can down the road. There were schemes to do that immediately after the Civil War. And in one of the terrible incidents of history, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. His vice president, Andrew Johnson, has been generally thought to be about the worst president this nation's had, impeached twice. And completely colluded with the South. There were reparations that were paid. Some reparations were paid to white plantation owners who lost their lands in the war. This government paid them, not the workers. So, but after that, they took the schemes of 40 acres and a mule, that you've heard that. Just think, what if every enslaved person, now free, were granted 40 acres and the means to farm their own land? How much better we would be right now in America without a century and a half of grief in writing, because there was a means. There was a means to go forward in your life. So they kicked the can down the road. But my friends, the can is still on the road. It didn't go anywhere. Will this generation show enough courage to do the right thing after so many years of saying, it just can't be done? Reparations will never fly in this country. Okay, yeah, if you were Japanese. And there were other instances. It's just when it comes to black people, then we've taken it off the table. There is such a thing as collective culpability. The Diocese of Maryland's experience with communities of African descent is different from New York's, or Hawaii's, or Arizona, or New Hampshire. We all live in a world, though, where darker-skinned people are treated as less than in relation to lighter-skinned people all over the world. And all of us are members of the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church has collectively benefited financially from slavery and racial segregation. I'm talking millions and tens of millions of dollars. We know, or should know, the history of how our church received substantial portions of its financial resources from racist structures. We all know, or should know, the truth of how the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, the SPG, derived much of its income from sugar plantations in the Caribbean that made use of slave labor. And two of the founders of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society, the DFMS, that's the official name of the Episcopal Church. Two of the founders also founded the American Colonization Society against black people. We have all benefited from institutionalized racism. And some dioceses and institutions have now begun to address their reckoning. Maryland is not the only one. I'm hesitant to name so many, Texas, Bishop of Texas, appropriate somebody, Georgia, New York, the Diocese of New York. And I'm undoubtedly skipping others. The Diocese of, I went to the Diocese of Fort Worth, and they started a program. Missouri, Massachusetts. I applaud the Diocese of Western New York for taking some initial strides on your own journey of how you will be repairing the racial breach in your branch of the Jesus movement. And thank you, Luke, for inviting me to come today to speak as a step toward embarking upon this great work. I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank St. Luke's Church. This is a beacon of reconciliation and justice in Jamestown and the surrounding community. It's going to take all of us to fix this. It doesn't matter if your ancestors came over on these shores on the Mayflower or on a slave ship. As I said before, they owned slaves or were themselves enslaved. If you're a recent immigrant, if you're black or brown or white or anything in between, we're all in the same boat now. Let's say we're all in the same boat. We all swim in the same ocean of racism. And fish do not know that they are wet. We didn't cause it, but we have to fix it. We, this generation, this diocese, this church, this body of Christ, need to repair the damage of centuries of theft. That's reparations. That is the act that still remains missing on the road to racial reconciliation in this country. That's what Jesus will do. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we have time for some questions, comments.
So I'm curious about the logistics of how you started this program and
Well, I learned it's going to be a little different in every diocese. We didn't really even come with a diocesan resolution. I said it was 2019. I have been bishop 10 years. That means it takes a while to build up some trust and capital, and they knew by that time that I wasn't going to ruin everything. And so I think it would have made a difference if I'd only been there a year or two, or even the first 5 years. So I say that to say that they granted me more authority than I see with some of my other bishops. And maybe some of that's the cultural place. So I mentioned this pastoral letter. It was a 40-page letter which made a case for reparation. And they went, this makes sense. This makes sense. And then a year later, we voted to form a committee, reparations committee, white and black people, young and old, from all over, to come up with a scheme. And then I gave them a direction. I said, I want you to develop a scheme for making grants to initiatives and programs in impoverished black communities. And I want it to be in those 5 areas I mentioned. Go after education, right? Healthcare / elder care. So many of those who are stuck in bad nursing homes and all that, especially women, their husbands couldn't earn a lot of money, they earn no money, and they're stuck. Economic development, as I mentioned, job creation, housing, affordable housing, and in environmental degradation. And so they say, fine, made a report, and the diocese said this is fine. I know in some other dioceses it's more, they still are trying to figure out what they want to do. And maybe that's an advantage of being there for a while, where I can just, because I know once you get committees going, everybody has an idea of what it is. But it's kind of like you need some direction. And then we also made a decision to not, from the reparations fund, grant monies to churches, to black churches, or black diocesan institutions. Why? Because in our way of thinking, reparations isn't geared to in some way assist the very institution that's culpable. And so I know, especially with some schools, I'll just name one, it's public, Virginia Theological Seminary. I think it was about $10 million that they said this is for reparations. Well, A, they sold some archaeological. And it was to provide scholarships for those who attend Virginia Theological Seminary. And so I know, but different dioceses, including the Diocese of Washington, made a different decision on that. But I just think this should be for non-church related, especially Episcopal church related institutions, because the public at large can kind of see, well, you guys are just helping yourselves. And then we, once the grants are made at a public gathering at the cathedral, and we invite the people to come, and we have the big check for that. See if you were, and they have representatives from their organization. You should, the tears that come to people's eyes. I can't believe the church is doing this. I can't believe that you're actually granting monies in a non-church related thing and not for purposes of proselytizing. It's a wonderful thing. So that, in a nutshell, is what happened. And that committee then, they sent it to the bishop and said, you approve of these grants? Yes. And then it goes to the diocesan council. But we never had those things argued at convention, because, convention is. I like to say, you heard of UBE, Union of Black Episcopalians? Yeah, we needed to unionize. The white union was called convention. But, so, in short. Yeah.
That tenure spans is critical, I think, with regard to creating a runway that allowed you to invite the conversation of reparations. And we have had a commission to dismantle racism in this parish for over 5 years. Some people don't even know we exist. But that notwithstanding, our approach has been to educate people about the history that makes something like reparations a logical initiative. Was that your approach in terms of how you got to where you're standing today?
Well, again, the process didn't begin with me. Because the Diocese of Maryland also had an anti-racism committee, and it had a reparations commission to study and look at reparations. By the time things got to convention, it was 20 years. Things can take a long time. Sometimes, hey, it took the church 1900 years to finally say that women can assume leadership. It took the world 1900 years to come to a universal conclusion that enslaving other human beings is sinful. So 20 years. But keep at it. I want to give you just a couple of quotes. One from Maggie Smith. She wrote in her book, Keep Moving. She said, "Diamonds are created from intense pressure over long periods of time. Pearls are formed around irritants. Precious things are made from discomfort." And so it takes years, and you have to work through people's discomfort. And then finally, another quote from St. Augustine, Hippo. He said, "The truth is like a lion. You have to defend it. The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself." So I like where you're starting here, on gathering data, history, truth-telling, increasing awareness. But once you travel down that road to reconciliation will come across that can. That's the one. And so you can start talking about it, but don't expect it to happen soon. Yeah, it can. But, in those other places, I named 2 places, Texas and Georgia, there was no diocesan process. The bishops in those dioceses just came across some money and said, we're going to put that to a fund. That's another way of doing this. But I like the longer road of getting everybody informed and on board with the decision. So when I left 2 years ago, this wasn't Bishop Sutton's scheme. This is our diocesan committee. We worked on this. We started on it before he came, and we're still going on it after he left. I think that has more integrity and more of a chance to stay put over a lifetime. That seed fund is a seed fund. It's still growing because people are still giving. Any others?
I have one question.
Yeah.
It's more or less with, you mentioned about the church in Western Maryland.
Yes.
I'm assuming it's like near Friendsville area.
Friendsville. We don't have a church in Friendsville. Does it exist? It's out there. It's right across the West Virginia. Is right across the river.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So like Cumberland area.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I grew up in coal country, and that was really it makes sense that you said that. It does. Like I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Oh yeah.
And in Eastern Ohio. And like my grandfather was a coal miner, and just like that doesn't surprise me that parish gave more
It really touched me. It kind of surprised me because, you know, I made assumptions.
Yeah.
And my assumption is that they were rather impoverished and like the last thing they want to do is help black or brown people. It was a wrong assumption. You know, they wanted to be in solidarity. And of course, it what goes around comes around. It actually, that church has grown. That's it. And here's the thing, for a number of people, especially those in the young adult groups, and that, they want to know, what's the church doing? You know, you guys are talking beaks, and I said, but what are you actually doing? And they want to know, where's the rubber hit the road? Are you out there fixing anything? Or are you talking, or are you just gather on Sunday and saying stuff ought to be fixed? So, you know, do something. Maybe one last word here, because I'm focusing on African Americans, and that's good and well, and, you know, that's obviously true. But I mentioned, you know, it's a different context in Hawaii or Arizona, or even this part of New York. And I do encourage, you know, keep at what's your relationship with impoverished black communities, but especially here, what's been your relationship with Native American communities? And that'll begin by the starting of relationships and see where that leads you in this context. So it may be, I'm not trying to direct you.
Well, I'll just jump in to say, our next event from the Disbanding Racism Committee is to go to the powwow in July.
Yeah.
So it's July 18th, I think, is our next really public event. So it's unfortunate I'm out of town. Every weekend I do the powwow because I have a family obligation. But it is a really fun opportunity to, in a low stakes kind of opportunity, get to know more about the culture and to really develop some of those ongoing relationships. And as you remember, St. Mary's that is in Salamanca, when the church disbanded, and the Presbyterian Standing Committee, we really wanted to figure out a way to return the property back to original stewards and so give it back to the nation. And so we're beginning to have some of those conversations. There's a lot of work to do.
It's all a part of reparations, and so who knows? It may be an occasion for saying, okay, here's our program for reparation, and it's one thing for the black, impoverished black community. It's another thing, and I keep using the word impoverished because I don't need anything from this church or the government. Obama's kids don't need reparations. The issue are for those who've been left behind because of the handing down of poverty through the ages. Focus on the poor. Not even so much the color of their skin. The other thing about, you know, writing checks, I think California is wired in this now. Okay, we're gonna just give money to black people. And I said, well, A, who's black? What does black mean? And if you're biracial, you get a half a check? Or you can trace or maybe you're black, but you came to these shores 5 years ago. You can say, well, no, at least one of the parents had to be traced to slavery. It gets kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And so, focus on those who've been left behind. Whole communities forgotten, like that. So it may be part of it is to African American communities, but maybe you say, a part of our reparations agenda is also reaching out to our brown brothers and sisters who were almost wiped out at our expense. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The sermon is more. It's upstairs.